Hello everyone, I'm back with another horror movie. Today, let's take a look at a 2024 horror film called Transplant. The story revolves around a girl named Wade, who is drawing a flower she saw in her father's diary. Her dad said it's called a wet flower, which attracts flies with its stench. Both of them have a strange scar, which seems to be hereditary. Her father is a scientist and claims he's working on something to treat the scars on their faces. Later, he collects a serum he created in a small vial and injects it into a piece of animal skin. Then, he places the skin on the scar, and, surprisingly, the skin started to grow, which made him really happy. It seemed like the experiment was a success, but who would have thought that just a few seconds later, the skin began to grow uncontrollably, almost covering his entire face. He struggled to breathe and used a scalpel to cut the skin off, but it quickly started growing again at a rapid pace. Things took a turn for the worse. Wade, who was beside him, tried to help by repeatedly stabbing her father's face with a knife, but in the end, he still died. Many years after that incident, Wade was already 18 or 19 years old. She was passionate about science and had earned a scholarship to attend a prestigious university in New Zealand. She soon arrived at her new place, and upon moving in, Wade was picked up by her aunt. Her aunt was delighted to see her niece here and agreed to let Wade stay at her place. On the way home, her aunt told Wade that her husband had left her. Now he was living with his daughter Angela, and soon they arrived home. Wade also met Angela, and at first glance, she found Angela to be very beautiful. Her aunt encouraged Angela and Wade to get along and have fun together, but Angela couldn't even speak basic Chinese. After that, Wade settled in there. She prayed for her deceased father and offered local New Zealand food as tribute. The next day marked Wade's first day at university. Since she was new, she wasn't very familiar with the routes, but fortunately, she met a disfigured man. It was John who showed her a way to the classroom. Later, Wade attended a lecture by a professor named Dr. Paul. She sat alone at the back, while Angela and her good friends, Eve and Molly, sat at the front. Not long after, Dr. Paul released the test results and announced that Wade had scored a perfect 100. This was truly astonishing and impressive. He also revealed that he was looking for a lab assistant and invited anyone interested to volunteer. Afterwards, Wade went to the science lab and took out his father's old notebook to study. At that moment, Dr. Paul came over and asked about the notebook, noticing that all the notes were written in Chinese. Wade answered timidly that it was written by his father, and that he was now trying to finish his father's work. The professor saw Wade's potential and asked him to be his lab assistant, promising that if Wade did well, he would definitely let him conduct experiments. Wade eagerly agreed. At this point, the story shifts to Angela, who returns home with her friends and goes into Wade's room, where they start making fun of the memorial tablet for Wade's father. But then, they are startled by the scar on Wade's father's face in a photo. Angela says that Wade has the same kind of scar, only he usually covers it with a scarf. Then, the group starts searching Wade's room, where they find all sorts of photos of dissected animals and insects. This freaked the girls out, so they left the room and then started watching a movie. When Wade came back, he joined them, but the three girls seemed a bit uncomfortable around him. Not long after Wade arrived, the three of them left, leaving him alone. Meanwhile, Paul received an email from the research committee, stating that he must make a breakthrough within 2 weeks or his funding would be withdrawn. The next day after class, Wade saw Angela hanging out with her friends, which made him feel a bit jealous. Awkwardly, he tried to join them and invited them to try his father's favorite Chinese food, but the girls hesitated and declined. Later, during the meal, he still followed them. Angela was already getting impatient. She didn't eat anything, while Wade started eating chicken feet, which shocked the girls. Angela and Eve left right away, and Molly ate a little bit of food before leaving as well. On the way home, Wade talked to John about his scar, saying that his mom told him maybe it was because his ancestors did something bad, so he ended up with this scar that smells so bad. But John disagreed with that idea and said that Wade was very handsome. Not long after, Paul drove Wade home. On the way, Paul said he wanted to focus on researching Wade, and that if they worked together, maybe they could achieve some groundbreaking results. After getting home, Wade excitedly shared the news with his father. But just then, he suddenly heard some noise coming from Angela's room. He peeked in secretly and saw Angela and her boyfriend Gus having a good time. At that moment, Angela's dog noticed Wade was spying and started barking like crazy. This reminded Angela that Wade was still at home, and she immediately started yelling at him, telling him to stay away from her both at school and at home. She also said she didn't want to smell incense or the stench of rotten food at home. This deeply hurt Wade's feelings. The next morning, Paul and Wade started studying his dad's formula and came to a conclusion. It was missing a binding agent that could fuse skin tissue together. They carried out a series of experiments to figure out what the binding agent might be, but all of them failed. Days went by like this, with them working tirelessly, but still not making any significant progress, which made Paul increasingly frustrated. He started taking out his anger on Wade. One day, Molly walked into the lab and asked Paul if he still needed a lab assistant. To everyone's surprise, the professor agreed and handed her a piece of paper to sign, then the two girls went home together. Molly apologized to Wade, saying she didn't mean to take her job and that she understood how hard it was to get in, and suggested that they look out for each other. This made Wade feel a little better, but her attention was caught by a booklet. Notably, it was about the flower of poetry, which reminded her of her childhood. That night, Wade, determined, arrived. She went to a rare wet flower exhibition and stole some liquid from there. Then she returned to the lab and used the substance as a binder to complete the previous formula. In another room, Paul was entangled with Eve when suddenly the noise from the lab interrupted them. Paul was surprised to see his former lab assistant Wade there. Wade took a piece of skin from his thigh and replaced it with animal skin, injecting it with her new formula. Amazingly, his skin began to heal immediately. This confirmed that the experiment was finally a success. Moments later, Paul came over. Wade excitedly told Paul that the formula worked and showed off his freshly healed thigh. On the other side, Eve misunderstood the situation and immediately took a photo of the scene with her phone. Afterwards, Eve entered the room, pulled Wade away, and said that the girls should go back to rest. After both girls left, Paul, now alone, discovered the notebook that had been left behind, so he called his friend, seeking help to translate a Chinese work. Not long after, Eve sent the photo to Angela, which infuriated Angela, and she immediately went home to look for Wade. Meanwhile, Wade was taken by Eve to a place, where Eve warned her not to try to seduce Paul for the sake of grades, saying it was not a good idea. Wade denied everything, saying there was nothing between her and Paul, but Eve didn't believe her at all. Then she left Wade there alone, leaving her in this remote place, after walking for several hours. Wade finally made it back home, only to find the furious Angela waiting for him. He saw that his father's memorial tablet had been destroyed. This was bad. He warned that their ancestors would curse them for this, but Angela didn't care at all and immediately started fighting with Wade. In his rage, he tried to strangle him. However, in self-defense, Wade stabbed Angela to death with a pair of chopsticks nearby. He was instantly overcome with guilt and desperately tried to wake Angela up, but nothing worked. He then took the body to the bathroom and came up with a plan to get himself out of trouble. After removing the chopsticks, Wade peeled the skin off her face, then cut off a layer of Angela's skin and injected her with a certain substance. Then he stuck Angela's skin onto his own face, a process that was excruciatingly painful for him. When it was all over, Wade had astonishingly transformed into Angela. Even her previous scars had completely disappeared. A moment later, Angela's aunt returned home. Wade pretended to be Angela, and her unsuspecting aunt, noticing nothing unusual, hugged Angela just like always, completely unaware that her real niece's body was hidden under the bed. Not long after, Wade started watching Angela's videos and began imitating her mannerisms and behavior. Just then, her aunt suddenly knocked on the door, saying she had to go on a business trip for a week. She apologized to her daughter, saying she was always so busy. The next day, Wade went to school as Angela and experienced what it was like to be her, drawing everyone's attention. After class, he hung out with Eve and Jasmine, and none of them noticed anything strange about Angela. In the afternoon, she was picked up by Gus, and the two of them went for a picnic in a secluded forest. Wade felt incredibly happy, because she had never had a boyfriend before. But just then, Angela's face suddenly fell off onto Gus's face. Panicked, Gus accidentally fell off a cliff and died. Wade was terrified by what had happened and desperately searched for his father's notebook, but no matter how hard he looked at home, he couldn't find it. He quickly realized that the professor had been with him at the time. But Professor Paul wouldn't answer his phone no matter how many times Wade called. Paul was researching Wade's father online and studying his notebook. That's when he saw the sketch of the corpse flower. Eventually, he figured out the secret ingredient he needed. Meanwhile, Wade used the substance again, trying to wear Angela's face over his own, but as the liquid kept running out, he started to get worried. Later, Paul went to the corpse flower exhibition and collected some of the liquid, but by then the corpse flower already looked somewhat rotten. At that moment, Wade arrived at the science lab, frantically searching for the notebook, but still couldn't find it. He managed to get Paul on the phone again, but Paul claimed the notebook had disappeared. He also emphasized that Wade's experiments had been completed at his place, so all the research results belonged to him. This made Wade furious, and before leaving the lab, he stole some things. The next day, after shopping with Eve while pretending to be Angela, Wade and Eve returned home to spend the night. During this time, Eve noticed a foul stench in the house, but Wade said it was just the smell of his cousin's weird stuff. At that moment, Wade started to feel unwell and noticed that Angela's skin was deteriorating. Wade wanted to go back upstairs, but Eve followed him. Just then, Wade launched an attack, forcing Eve to flee the house and hide in a nearby pond. Panicked, she decided to dive underwater and hold her breath to hide for a while, but Wade quickly discovered her hiding spot and drilled through her skull with a drill. Wade dragged the body back into the house and then started wrapping his own face. The next day, Wade became Eva. He even went so far as to dye his hair blonde to make himself look more like her. At this point, 2 police officers came to the house looking for Angela, but Wade claimed that he wasn't here right now. The police quickly checked the place, and after not finding anything suspicious, they left. Not long after, Wade ran into Molly. Molly said that Angela still hadn't returned her calls, and Gus had been found dead. Wade noticed a few police officers in the distance. They had been searching for Angela. Later that day, Wade dismembered the bodies, put them into plastic bags, and threw them into the pond. He then sent a message from Eva's account, claiming that Paul had slept with a student, and Wade even attached a photo of himself with the professor. The next day, Paul was fired, and his reputation was completely ruined. Wade then went to his house, hoping to get the notebook, but Paul was in no mood and told him to leave. Not long after, Paul started experimenting with a substance. He applied it to a piece of skin, and then the 2 pieces of skin fused together seamlessly. He had achieved his goal. Paul excitedly sent a message to Eva, asking her to come over and celebrate. Not long after, Wade arrived at Paul's house. He opened a secret compartment, took some anesthetic from the wine cabinet, and then went to another room to prepare drinks. This gave Wade a perfect opportunity. He noticed a small bottle of the substance Paul had created in the compartment, and Wade immediately stole it. But Wade soon noticed that his skin was peeling off, so he pretended to have a headache and rushed out of the house. Later, Paul reflected on Wade's strange behavior and discovered the bottle was missing when he checked the compartment. He was shocked and suddenly, somehow, realized that the woman might not have been Eva, but Wade. Meanwhile, Wade returned home and painfully peeled Eva's skin off his face. At that moment, Molly suddenly visited him and was surprised to see Wade's face covered in bruises. She also noticed Wade was wearing Eva's dress. Understandingly, Molly comforted Wade, saying everything would be alright. Then she invited Wade to stay with her tonight, and Wade accepted the offer. But when Molly opened the fridge, she saw it. A dismembered corpse. At that moment, Wade suffocated Molly from behind. He was filled with regret, because Molly was the only person who had ever been kind to him. Not long after, Paul arrived at the house and found Wade curled up in a dark room. Paul boasted that Wade had made a big show of taking his time, trying to finish their father's work, but he himself had done it in just one afternoon. Wade screamed that it was his father's research achievement, but Paul didn't care, declaring that he was going to make history. Then he asked where the bottle was. Wade said it was in the fridge, and then this scene happened. When Paul woke up, he found himself tied to the table, with his entire neck cut open. Wade then placed a piece of meat on his wound and injected the substance into it. His skin began to regenerate rapidly again. Wade's father had experienced something similar before. His skin quickly covered his nose and mouth. Wade shoved a straw into his mouth, making him suffer even more. Soon, a nearby neighbor heard the screams. When he came over, he was terrified by the horrific scene and immediately ran out of the house to call the police. Wade realized he had been exposed, so he quickly grabbed a few things, along with that bottle of medicine, and left. He ran frantically through the town, but the police soon spotted him and started chasing after him. Not long after, Wade arrived at the subway station, where he encountered the homeless man, John. He begged John to hide it under the blanket, but while hiding, he accidentally crushed the medicine bottle. The substance quickly made contact with his wound and with John, fusing the two of them together into a bizarre shape. Sometime later, Wade also disappeared, and he was accused of multiple murders. The bodies of Angela, Eve, and Molly were found, while Paul was in critical condition at the hospital. Wade's aunt was devastated by her daughter's death. Later, she noticed someone on the street who looked just like Wade, so she shouted loudly. But it turned out to be someone else. At the movie's end, he noticed a person with severe facial disfigurement, which frightened him. He ran away. It turned out this was the terrifying fusion of John and Wade, with lips, teeth, and hands in unnatural places. And that's the story of the movie. Thank you for watching. See you next video.